la sesión. Thank you all for being here. And welcome to our two guests. And so I'm sure you all are as eager as I am to hear from them about this remarkable example of a solution. Because here in climate journalists, actually, we are always looking for solutions, not only to be, we are told we are too alarmist and too pessimistic all the time, and no talking about the conflict now, about the climate change, but we have here a remarkable example about solutions in both sides, as long as in the environmental side as in the conflict. Because as you know, ECOPeace Middle East is a unique organization that brings together Jordanian, Palestinian and Israeli. We don't have here our Jordanian counterpart. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, but we have the Israeli and Palestinian part. They share solutions to the climate crisis and to the water security in a region especially impacted by climate change. As you know, the Middle East is one of the most arid regions in the world, and where the control of natural resources very impacted by climate change has become also additional source of conflict. That's why the ECOPeace Middle East is such a remarkable example that has 3 decades of environmental and peace-building efforts and has been nominated to the Nobel Peace Prize. And we have here Gidon Bromberg, which is the co-founder and Israel director of ECOPeace Middle East. He has written extensively on the relationship between water issues and Middle East peace, and has presented that before the UN Security Council, the UN Climate Summit, the US Congress, European Parliament, and other international forums. And with us is also Nada Majdalani, if I say correctly. She's the Palestine director of ECOPeace Middle East, and she has served in leading technical positions with several international agencies in the areas of infrastructure development. And she's a strong believer in the impact of proactive dialogue and has been part of several affiliations of Palestinian Israeli groups, including One Voice Movement and the Palestinian Israeli Young Entrepreneurs Forum. But let's start by the beginning, how it all started. Let's start learning a little bit how a bunch of people were motivated enough to create and found ECOPeace in 1994. One of them was Gidon. And can you explain us what motivated you all and your colleagues to build this alliance, to cooperate amidst such a difficult geopolitical context back in that time too?
So so firstly, thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to talk to you and to meet you all. In 1994, it was, looking back today, it's a different planet. We were in euphoria. We really felt, Palestinians, Jordanians, Israelis, Egyptians, that peace had broken out and that we can really look forward to a peaceful future of shared prosperity. And one of the issues that really brought home concern to environmentalists like myself was that to make sure that peace was not only going to be between countries, but also between peoples and nature. And the ECOPeace name almost at that time took peace for granted and was worried about the echo, about the ecology, major development plans around the Dead Sea without any consideration of carrying capacity, major highways, industrial estates. So we came together in 94 in order to make sure that peace was also going to be a sustainable peace, because we back then already recognized that peace will not last. We fight for the conflict is over the land. We're fighting over land. But if we kill the land, then what are we fighting for? And so that was a key focus. And of course, very quickly, we came to understand that the peace wasn't going well. There were spoilers from both sides that poisoned the efforts to move forward. And we had to reinvent ourselves. Yeah. And in our 30 years, we've reinvented ourselves several times. But today, we really are an environmental peace-building organization where where we see the role of the environment and the common threats and the common concern as a means to build trust, which is so lacking. Even more so, of course, in the midst of the horrors that all of our peoples are experiencing in the middle of this war. And therefore, even before the academic term was coined, environmental peace building is not more than 30 years old. It's 20-something years old as an academic term. We were already employing that, and we were the first to be written about that working together on the environment is a way to actually create peace.
How many of you were back in that time? And were you already worried about climate change in the 90s?
No. So firstly, if we had a photo of the founders, firstly, they were all men, which is just terrible when we, of course, look today. Today, thankfully, we're a female majority organization, at least, two, the Jordanian director is also female, and our board also has a female chair, and there's far more representation. So looking back at that time, it was all men, and the climate crisis was something that back in '94 we weren't really aware of it. It really came only a decade later that we understood that the climate, and it was part of, again, a third reinvention of the organization to heavily focus on the climate crisis.
And Najat, you joined the ECOPeace organization later on. What did motivate you to join it, and how do you think this organization has helped the region over the years?
Yeah, so I joined around 7 years ago, and my background in terms of education is environmental management. And I've always been an active member of, as you mentioned, with Palestinian and Israeli organizations at the grassroots level. And it really started since I was a teenager when we came back to Palestine, the generation of the Oslo agreements. So when we came back to Palestine after Oslo, I was enrolled as a teenager with environmental peacebuilding organizations, and it really grew up with me. And it really shows here that starting from a young age to understand the importance of understanding the environmental reality, the water reality of both sides, can really bring you up to a level when you grow up to be different, to stand out for something that is really meaningful and different for your own nation and for others. And I think really what brought me up to ECOPeace and my interest is basically my upbringing and my background and my interest in environmental issues as well.
Of course, but let's go through a little bit about the work in the field of ECOPeace, because you are the director of the Palestinian branch, which is based in Ramallah. You are based in Tel Aviv, and there's the Jordanian part in Amman. And I guess you all coordinate and are in contact all the time to bring together programs, which are based mainly in education, but also in advocacy to fight climate change and water scarcity. That would be, I guess, the summary of very intense work.
Indeed. So for me, for example, the education program is one of the dearest and most closest to my heart, because the impact is really quick. We see how young students are transformed immediately, and we hear testimonies from their parents, and it's really fulfilling to see this transformation on an individual level. With advocacy, it's a longer process. It's more complicated with our politicians and leadership, and with all that is happening around us. So, but this is what keeps us going, I think. This is what keeps us motivated to make a change somehow.
It's a really unique way of working, because we're not three separate offices. We're a single office with a single board, with three directors managing by consensus. We have to agree on all policy issues as we move forward. We have a single 5-year strategy where we have some 60 staff Every staff member is in a daily communication with their parallel staff in the other offices. We are the only regional organization that exists in any field, not just the environment.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Yeah, and in your work, you also increase. You're working to increase the input of renewables and to build a climate smart agriculture. You have separate programs. Talk about these other programs you also.
So you know, in one of our reinventions, when really we started not only to read about the climate crisis, but actually feel it on our skin. I mean, you know, the world is meeting at the Baku COP right now, you know, fearful of the 1.5-degree increase in temperature. Well, the Middle East has already experienced a 2-degree increase in temperature since the 1950s, and we can expect an additional 4-degree increase in temperature. When we go to the Mediterranean Sea, like you, the water in summer is 2 degrees higher now than the historical record. You can feel the difference. 2 degrees is really significant. So like much of our learning, we look to learn from other areas, and we look to the European experience and of the European Green Deal. Europe was very early on understanding that the climate crisis hits every European country, and every country has to have its national policies. But if there is not integration, if there's not a regional policy, then we don't succeed in combating climate crisis. So we tried to learn from that, and we came out in 2020 with a report calling for a green-blue deal for the Middle East, primarily focused on Israel, Palestine, Jordan, with real practical, because we're not the European Union, we don't have the resources to do the level of research that the Commission does, but we try to identify practical projects utilizing Jordan's vast desert areas. Yes, Jordan has massive deserts that can produce renewable energy by harnessing the sun at scale and at price that Israel and Palestine could only dream of. And Israel and Palestine, at least Gaza on the Mediterranean, can produce desalinated water, because the major impact of the climate crisis is reduction in precipitation or massive change where it floods, and for 9 months of the year, no rain, drier and drier periods, and through advances in technology of manufactured water, then both Israel and Palestine have that comparative advantage, being on the Mediterranean in close proximity to our major population centers. So again, we looked at the experience of Europe of coal and steel, and how the coal and steel agreement after the Second World War was the backbone of peace building. So we asked, what are the natural resources in the midst of a climate crisis that could be the backbone of peace building in our country? And it was harnessing the sun and the sea. So that's why we're about practical and working with not only educators and youth and grassroots, but also with the business sector, also with creating alliances, and of course the investment community to see these projects actually move forward.
This green-blue deal that you proposed, you went and what was the answer from the government level or the institutions in the region?
So when we started developing the green-blue deal, or at least some of the integral parts of it, including the water energy exchange, and also when we looked at the regional also sustainable master plan for the Jordan Valley, both processes included an interactive process with our governments from Palestine, Israel, and Jordan. We had several consultation meetings. We have validated data. We've developed concept projects together with consultation from the technical people on all three sides with the government. And eventually, when things come actually to implementation, here's the trick and here's the challenge. because every then single government comes with an excuse that, well, this is not the right time. We have priorities. We have to address some certain political hurdles. And at least on our side in Palestine, we would go to the technical people and ministries, and they would say, wow, these are really interesting ideas, perfect. And in terms of, a vision, in terms of technicalities, this is doable. But we need the political will. Maybe if you get us the political cover from the government, we'll be able to do things and move forward. Then we go to the political will and to the government and the political leaders, and they say, well, we need some recommendations from the technical people in order to move things forward. So we are in a ping-pong position where we have to go back and forth between the two sides, and things never get done.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, climate crisis is not waiting anyone, and the frustration of our people, the frustration that peace is not happening, that the suffering is continuing. And this is what is heartbreaking for us, that we still have to do this after 30 years.
Yeah.
And we really hope that we don't have to do this longer, but that we will still be there for each other to strategize and to think forward for a better future for us all.
Of course. And I guess that the situation in the last year has been even worse in that regard. But before entering the current conflict, I want to focus a little bit on water and the scarcity of water in the region. First of all, how scarce it is? I mean, do you think there would be enough water in the region for the whole population, even if there were no conflicts blocking the access to some people? And how is climate change impacting these water resources in the Middle East?
So we live in a very arid part of the world. There are 10 million Israelis, 11 million Jordanians, and 5.5 million Palestinians in West Bank, Gaza alone. The region was never meant to have so many people. So there's no question that there isn't sufficient natural water to meet all of the needs, certainly in the lifestyles that we run. But there has been significant advances in technology, and the combination of desalination and treatment of wastewater for agricultural purposes, particularly in the last 15 years, has been a game changer. And while the natural water is shrinking because of climate change, and there are problems. We're not saying that desalination should come first, should come alone, it should come last, and of course it should always be powered by renewable energy. But given the size of our populations in the middle of a desert, there's no choice other than today to go. And we see that as a means to help build peace. Because when we look at the Oslo Accords of 1993, 1994, water was seen as one of the final status issues. Water was seen in 1994 as an issue that can't be solved easily because there was only a limited amount of natural water, and sharing that water fairly means moving it from one to the other at someone's expense. And therefore, water was put aside together with other hard issues of Jerusalem and borders and settlements, refugees, etc. And the idea of Oslo was a deal would be struck. And we spoke to the negotiators at the time, and they were saying, well, Israel would be generous on water, Palestine would be generous on refugees, and these issues would move forward. 30 years later, our governments have still failed. And from our perspective, all governments have a responsibility here for failing to move forward. And yet the reality of why water was identified as a final status issue, as a hard issue, is no longer the case. And certainly for the last 12 years, we've been advocating stop holding water hostage. Mm-hmm. Let's utilize the fact that, and in this case, particularly Israel, is a leader in manufacturing water. We can move forward Palestine can get a fair share of its natural water today, with Israelis not losing any. In fact, 80% of the domestic water supply in Israel is coming from desalination. Half the agriculture is being produced through treated wastewater for agriculture. So this is a solvable issue, but the response, as Nada said, from our governments is no, from both sides. We must solve everything together. There must be no disputes left. And therefore nothing moves forward. And this is a low-hanging fruit that can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what we're also doing at the moment is we're not here speaking out of abstract. We are also addressing these issues with evidence-based solutions, because we need the data and the scientific evidence to also convince the leadership that this is actually doable, that Palestine can get its fair share of natural water resources and get its access to water rights at no expense to Israeli water security, because, again, because of the increased supply of water. And we're, even at this difficult time, engaging with Palestinian and Israeli hydrologists, working together on a software and a modeling system to optimize the resources with demand areas in both places, and therefore coming with recommendations and suggestions for win-win solutions in terms of how much Palestine can increase pumping from shared water resources at no expense to Israelis. And this is led by our team, by Palestinian and Israeli hydrologists and scientists. And this is where also the beauty of NGOs comes in, is because we can then engage with private sector, with scientists to provide data, with grassroots to push and to keep the momentum forward, in order to basically reach out to our stakeholders and politicians with something convincing.
Yes. As you said, the water is at the core of the conflict. It's adding to that. Some said in the past, some experts even talk about the water wars in the Middle East. And in this case, as you said, it's also been a key issue, because during the last year and the huge impact of the conflict that we've seen has already had an impact in the water security of the region, especially in the Gaza Strip. You talk about your work trying to level this issue, but also you are in the field in the Gaza Strip, if I'm not wrong, right? What are you working there exactly?
We are in the field, but there's much more to be done. We're not also at the scale of other emergency or humanitarian aid agencies, but we are doing whatever we can do as much as possible. So at the moment we were active in terms of supplying water to the displaced people in Gaza. We were active we are currently purchasing small-scale mobile desalination units and spare parts for water and sanitation facilities that are still operating. And we have had a real impact in terms of advocacy, in terms of addressing the water and sanitation crisis in Gaza, hand in hand with our team in the Tel Aviv office as well, because we gather the data, we understand the situation on the ground in the Palestine office, and we channel this information to the team of advocacy in Tel Aviv, and they try to find ways how to utilize some narrative and some discourse that would be convincing to change the policy towards the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So we've done various efforts, which maybe Gidon can speak about, in terms of the water crisis. But yes, we are on ground and we're trying to do as much as we can for the populations.
Which obstacles are you facing in the field to help people in the Gaza Strip and to get them access to water?
So we're in the middle of a war, and both sides are suffering terribly. There's a terrible loss of life, clearly with horrific numbers in Gaza, but also in Israel, and people live in fear, and there are hostages that are still not released. So there's so much antagonism towards cooperation, towards believing that there is another side that we can work with that we both face. And I think the type of efforts that we lead is that we try to highlight that if we don't solve these issues, and particularly if we led advocacy to reopen, Israel has 3 pipes that it was selling water to Gaza beyond the groundwater of Gaza, which is not very drinkable. The major supplier of water to Gaza was from 3 pipelines from Israel, and after October 7th, on October 8th, the Minister of Defense decided to close those 3 pipes. And we worked with some of the leading health professionals, the heads of public health schools in Israel, to highlight that while the sentiment, might be understood, the impact is cross-border. Without the fresh water needs, without dealing with sanitation issues, pandemic disease will break out in Gaza. And the impacts of pandemic disease don't stop at borders. So we were even able to write to the War Cabinet, again, at a very professional level, highlighting the lose-lose, that anger and animosity as to what happened on October 7th, which was, a massacre, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that stopping water supply, even if it's the selling of water, is going to contribute to anything better. Within a week, the first pipeline was reopened. Within another 2 weeks, the second pipeline. It took us a lot longer and clearly we weren't alone here. There are many international actors in the advocacy, but having also Israelis advocate for that, and particularly health professionals, makes a difference. And we know because when the particular decision makers, declared reopening and particularly allowing fuel to come back into Gaza for the powering of small desalination plants and the pumping out of sewage, some of the language that we wrote in our letters were quoted of that. Well, if this doesn't come back, then pandemic disease will break out and impact also the Israeli population. And I think that's the beauty of our work as a whole.
So you managed to get some water into, but not the necessary amount, I guess. So there's still a lack of.
Oh,
of course, there's
absolutely.
Absolutely. There's about 95% of the infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed in terms of water and sanitation. So technically, even if there's repairs to the incoming lines from Israel to Gaza have been repaired, still the network and the distribution system is heavily damaged. And several also water storage tanks, they do not get enough water in order to store this water. And all 6 wastewater treatment plants have been also heavily destroyed and unoperational at the moment. So you can imagine that in the upcoming period during the winter time, we will see and we will suffer from flooding of sewage water all over the place among the tents of around 2 million displaced people. This is the tragedy that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza will face and where people will actually face on the ground. And we are aware, again, as Gidon mentioned, that pandemic disease will not stop at between the tents and the displaced people. It will certainly not recognize any borders or any, defense mechanisms or weapons to scare them away. But what we're fearing as well is that we have already seen polio coming up in Gaza a few months ago. And that a huge vaccination campaign had been distributed, but still we don't know what comes next, and we need to act fast because, and this is what you also advocate about is to do as much repairs as possible and to provide sustainable energy supply to some of those key wastewater treatment plants in order to address the situation before it gets really ugly.
Okay, so we see that this current conflict has changed a lot the work that at ECOPeace and your programs, and not only on water. I guess that the whole work you do has been changed during the last year. How has it, and is it been difficult to cooperate, to maintain the cooperation between you three in such a polarized context?
It's been really difficult and very shocking to us all on October 7th and on until I think we've suffered a lot the first 3 months. It was really difficult for us to come out of the difficult feelings because each side has come with their own narratives, their own stories, their own terminologies, which was really difficult to contain all these difficult emotions. And it took us a lot of communication and understanding. So we've been talking on daily basis at the leadership level, Gidon, myself, and Diana, and another 3 senior staff from each office. We've managed to discuss how we can heal together. And we've went through a mindfulness and healing process with an expert from Sri Lanka for around 6 months in order to be able to put ourselves together and to really concentrate and comprehend on what is most difficult and most important as well. The most important is to pull ourselves together because we can sit in the corner and cry all night and complain and curse the occupation and curse Hamas and curse the reality. But this will not serve our nation. I don't think crying in the corner will save Palestinian lives or will provide an extra drop of water. What matters is actually to stand up together and address the situation in the most practical ways that are feasible for the time being, because we're also not magicians. We don't have, superpowers. We're just a 60 staff NGO with humble people. They're a little bit crazy and insane to the current situation to be in this place and this position that they're working together. But this is what wakes up us in the morning and makes us motivated to go to the office and really do something that is maybe a drop in the ocean of what needs to be done, but it's at least fulfilling to us as human beings. This is responsibility. I don't think any leader of our countries has such responsibility that we see in 60 staff in our offices in Palestine and Israel and Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, we really see each other. When we talk about lost staff in all of our offices, have lost family in all offices. People have lost their homes. They have nowhere to live or move to other places. And we know them. We see each other. And I think in many ways, that's the most important message that we need to convey, that we all need to see each other. We need to see the suffering on all sides. And it's not about who's suffering more. It's recognizing that there's suffering and there's fear and there's people utilizing that suffering and fear for their own narrow purposes, not for the interests of our 2 populations, 3 populations with Jordan. And that's the purpose of ECOPeace, is to see that there are legitimate Palestinian aspirations, legitimate Israeli concerns on security, legitimate Jordanian concerns on their economic future. We need a Palestinian state living side by side in peace with Israel and in regional integration if we are to ever move forward. So we link the environmental issues, the climate issues, with the broader political and economic and security issues, we can't segregate, because otherwise we don't really provide the solution that we need to the complicated issues. But the first thing is to see each other as people that have families and have real concerns that are legitimate and need to be dealt with. That's what makes us different.
Yes, of course. You even have a plan for the day after. You are already looking forward to the day after the conflict. Explain us a little bit, which is this plan for the after the war.
The day after plan does not come in isolation of, first of all, regional movements that are happening at the moment and regional ideas. But it really comes at the heart of also the importance of looking into the reconstruction of Gaza after the war in a different dimension. Because the former ways of reconstruction that was dependent on foreign aid and pity and let's give the Palestinians a little bit of money to fix a pipe there, fix a treatment plant here, has not brought us the peace and security that we want, has not brought us the prosperity that we need. The momentum that things are moving forward in terms of regional integration and connectivity, in terms of economics and economic corridors, especially the India Middle East economic corridor, the IMEC, is basically perhaps the train that we need to hop on in order to recognize that we need to do things differently. And we're proposing the peace triangle of Palestine, Israel, and Jordan, where the Gaza reconstruction could be fit in with also lots of three catalytic projects that are important in water security, in energy security, and sustainable transport, where, again, these have environmental feasibility, they have economic feasibility, but also geopolitical feasibility that would enable the moving forward of the two-state solution. And vice versa, the IMEC idea and this corridor will not be possible if the peace process has not been attained or has not been, moved forward. Because in order to be able to connect the Middle East with Europe, the middle area, if it's still in wars and in bloodshed and in complications, all these aspirations for future collaborations from east to west will not work out. And those three catalytic projects are, maybe we can put the slides if you want.
Yeah, they have some slides and
we have
maps.
just three maps, very quick ones.
To show you the day after plan.
So we chose
here.
Yes, we chose IMEC, this economic corridor, because of who's behind it. The European Commission, Germany, France, Italy are the European signatories to a memorandum of cooperation that was signed at the last G20 a year ago, together with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, India, and the United States. Israel, Palestine, and Jordan are not signatories to IMEC. We're a small NGO. We can't create such government coalitions that want to improve economic relations. But we think that by, as Nada said, adding Israel, Palestine, and Jordan into this economic corridor and making sure that the economic corridor is not just economic, it's also two-state solution, regional integration, climate security, general security. We can stabilize, we can transform, we can be transformative in how peace can be achieved. And that's very different from the earlier attempts of peace building. I mean, I think we've come to the conclusion that Israelis and Palestinians alone cannot make the peace. That was also the case in Northern Ireland. You know, many people would argue if the European Commission, if Europe didn't invite both Ireland and the UK to join the Commission, we wouldn't have seen the Good Friday Agreement. There was an underlying impetus. Again, coal and steel was the underlying economic impetus for the creation of the European Union itself. We need to jump on to a broader coalition with an economic engine, but make sure that that economic engine includes in its heart peace building. And our proposal is through 3 projects that maybe
the
next slide,
please. So one of the first projects is the exchange of water and energy. And this is based on work that we've done before, which also Gidon explained on the exchange of water and desalinated water and renewable energy, where Jordan can vastly produce renewable energy and Palestine and Israel can produce desalinated water. We have seen already the first attempts to move forward on this project. Unfortunately, Palestine was not part of it when a letter of intent and an MOU was signed between Israel and Jordan, catalyzed by Emirati investments and American also facilitation. That the agreement between Israel and Jordan has been moving forward until the war started in 2001 and 2021 and 2022. But here we also say that for the day after, we would like to still recognize that Palestine is part of this configuration and that desalination from Gaza could provide water to Gaza, to the West Bank, and also to Jordan through the Israeli water carrier. And therefore, adding Gaza to the mix that is going to Jordan is also important for the Jordanian community to accept the deal that has been signed in 2021, and that is really also now facing a lot of what do you call it? Criticism and riots in the streets of Jordan to stop the deal with Israel. So that's one important project that, again, it shouldn't be moved forward by regular funding mechanisms. These are bankable projects where the private sector can come in and invest in, not Palestinian, not Israeli private sector, it needs to be IMEC members and IMEC countries who need to invest in these projects in order to also realize the IMEC idea in the future.
And it's bringing together the environmental part and the peace building part, because I guess that this project needs the two-state solution in order to be made properly, or?
It doesn't need the two-state solution, but it's a catalyst for a two-state solution. Water is one fundamental element for any state to be established, and for also regional integration, it brings interest to all the parties in the region, and therefore, again, agreeing on some baby steps on the water security issues is something that could showcase and catalyze other maybe deeper issues that need to be understood and discussed.
Have you presented excuse me, do you wanted to?
No, I was going to go to the second project, but please.
Have you presented the project to the government of Israel, the government of authority, and what has been the response?
So as Nada said, our efforts actually led to an agreement that has frozen, and we're coming and saying that the day after, which we of course hope was to happen yesterday, not just tomorrow, needs to include Palestine, needs to include a desalination plant in Gaza, and from certainly my discussions with some officials on the Israeli side, we present answers, because if it's a large desalination plant where the Emiratis and the Saudis are, for an example, the investors, and Jordan is also dependent on that water, then that gives a level of assurance from a security perspective to the Israeli side that pipes, because desalination is all about pipes, that pipes would not be taken and used for other purposes. So, you know, we tick the box. We can show that the producing, the manufacturing of water can take place not only for Israeli-Palestinian interests, but for broader interests of other actors in the region that then guarantee the operation to make sure that in all our three projects that we'll present, it's all about facing the fact that Israelis and Palestinians alone have not been able. We need the support, of course, of Europe and the United States, but even more so of our own neighborhood to guarantee the two-state solution, but also security for all of our peoples. The second project, we can go to the next slide, is very much also related to Europe. So an earlier study that's been done shows that in the southern area of Saudi Arabia, southern Jordan and the Sinai, that area can produce enough electricity through renewable energy that can power 30% of the eastern side of Europe, from Greece to Germany. And the red lines are lines that are already being discussed as part of a European, a Euro-Asia connector, a Euro-Africa connector with Egypt, in order to move electricity from the Middle East. It's completely in line with the vision of President van der Leyen to reduce dependence on Russian gas and of course, meet the climate commitments. It's part of the Saudi vision of 2030 of NBS that Saudi Arabia has to also remove itself from dependency on fossil and replace that with renewables. And the linkages through Haifa, through Israel, through Egypt are important, but we argue, and that's what the peace triangle is about, it's not good enough. It has to also include Palestine. And we want to see the infrastructure that is invested, and we're talking about billions of dollars of investment of renewable energy infrastructure from the Saudi Jordanian border in particular, moving it through Haifa, fine, but also through Gaza, to make sure that that private sector investment then again changes the interests. It makes it a Saudi survival interest to advance the two-state solution and to make sure that the two-state solution is not just, kept something as a word, but is implemented as a reality for the security of both peoples, because we must defeat the spoilers. We have fanatics on both sides that don't want to see a two-state solution, don't want to see an independent Palestine or an existing Israel. And by building these types of infrastructure by design, both through Israel and Palestine, in this case, all through Egypt, we make it Europe's interest, not just in words, but in its economic viability to advance to meet its climate crisis commitments, to truly invest in the peace.
And is it renewable energy produced in the Middle East?
Yes.
Is it solar also? I see there
solar, wind,
green
and green hydrogen. Yes,
solar, wind. So it's
It's all renewables. It's all
mainly in Jordan or also in
Jordan,
Saudi
Saudi, and Egypt.
Yes, because they have the vast desert areas. They already have the some of the investments, and of course, Saudi Arabia has all the money. And of course, it has the need, because as long as Europe, and we hope that, of course, Europe doesn't lose track, but as long as Europe remains committed to its climate targets and to stop buying not only Russian gas, but American gas, which is, what now is being discussed, and we understand why, but that needs to be a short term. In the medium and long term, the Eastern Mediterranean can play a game-changing position, as North Africa will probably do for Spain and for France and the more western coast. And that's the type of vision of regional integration that needs to happen. But if it doesn't include advancing peace, then it probably won't happen. And none of us will survive the climate crisis.
And you think that Jordan government or our Saudi Arabian government may push for that? What's the perspective in the current political environment in the region?
Well, certainly one of the things that were happening before October 7th was the behind the doors talks about the Saudi-Israeli normalization. But then there's a big now hurdle in front of the Saudis that the current situation would not be enabling to move forward on these issues. And what we're seeing now is that there is an initiative by the Saudis and the European Union to move forward on the two-state solution. So in that sense, it is a really integral part to understand that political processes should not stay in a vacuum of what actually can be done on the ground. There needs to be a connectedness between the political thinking and the abstract thinking of plotting things on paper and with what can actually be practically done on the ground in order to move these aspirations forward. So in that sense, there is a huge interest, in my opinion, because Saudi Arabia is possibly the last fort in the Arab world where they have still not moved forward on the Arab-Israeli normalization. And they are seen in the Islamic world and in the Arab world as the leaders and the power that would dictate how the future of somehow the Middle East relationships with Israel would look like and would be. And they are the only missing piece at the moment.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think there would be really a big burden at the moment on Saudi Arabia to shift things around politically, especially now with the new US administration with Trump. And we think that there could be well, we don't know yet, but we will have really 4 interesting years to see what would come out of it. But I think Saudi is certainly some strong player that needs to
with the difficulty of the conflict right now, which makes things harder.
And it's really interesting. We're now seeing some soft language between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So it's really interesting to see those, this soft language happening. We don't know what it's plotting for the future, but certainly not another war. I think this is not the interest, neither Trump's interest or the Saudi interest in that sense.
We have a third
project.
Yeah, we have a third sort of catalyst, and that's building on again. So the renewable energy export is not ECOPeace's idea. That's part of Europe's vision. That's part of the Saudi vision. It's part of Jordan's vision. But that vision didn't include Palestine. And we're saying it needs to include Palestine if we're to achieve peace. So let's include it. That's what the peace triangle is about. And the third leg is this railway and the connecting of the transport of goods from India to the ports of the Gulf, particularly Oman and the UAE, where already the railways are being connected. And that deep blue line is a railway that Saudi has already finished building all the way to the border of Saudi Arabia and Jordan. There's nothing at the border between Saudi Arabia and Jordan other than sand.
Yeah.
And the reason that railway has already been built is because Saudi envisioned extending that railway across Jordan to Haifa port in Israel and to use Haifa port as a Gulf port. And we think that's a good idea, but insufficient if we're to achieve peace. So the proposal of ECOPeace, and it's blown up in the bigger map, in the blow-up map, is to build 2 railways using Jordan as a transport terminal and a port to Haifa, but also a port to Gaza. And when we think about the type of reconstruction that's needed, if Gaza port, like Haifa port, would be a Gulf port, I think of Rotterdam. It's not a Dutch port, although it's in Holland. It's a European port. Hamburg is in Germany, but it's a European, it serves all of Europe. So, and that level of integration means that there is investment from the whole region. There's dependency of the whole region. It creates an economic engine, as Nada said, rather than again rebuilding the way that Gaza has been rebuilt in the past, that's only led to another round of destruction. Involve far more actors, far more interest, that it becomes not only a lip service issue, their interest, but it's about their own economic survival. Then the engine for the rebuilding of Gaza becomes very much focused on Gaza being a Rotterdam for the Middle East, like Haifa, not instead of, but together with. And I think that's the type of thinking that ticks all the box. And of course, it's a electrified railway, so it ticks the climate box, and it ticks the security box, and it ticks the geopolitical box, and it has an economic engine. That's Europe's experience. Why has Europe, when people often speak to us and they say, oh, the Middle East conflict is thousands of years. It's not true. The Middle East conflict is about 100 years. Europe has had hundreds of years of bloodshed. Yet Europe was able to move beyond that after the horrors of the Second World War. Well, we're also in a stage of the horrors of this current war. We need the trigger to move beyond that. We need to learn from Europe's experience. Not the same, but there are lessons that we can draw, and that's what we're trying to do in this Peace Triangle edition to IMEC.
Of course, but maybe with the current political situation, with the current government in Israel, I guess it wouldn't be feasible. This port in Gaza, for example, that's not in the plans of the current political alignment, right?
No, not of the current government in Israel, although the IMEC idea is something that this current Israeli government is supportive of. So it understands that its future is dependent. That's why Israel wants integration and normalization with Saudi Arabia. So we're not speaking to an interest that doesn't exist, but we need to expand that interest to make sure, like all interest, there's always a price to be paid. And the type of price that we're putting on the table is the price of not moving forward on the two-state solution. That's our strength. We're able to say, well, you're not going to achieve the type of integration, and if we're talking to the Israeli public, unless we also reach the needed political dialogue between Israel and Palestine, and that the fear that Israelis live under, that another October 7th, well, we come and say, well, it becomes security then becomes a regional issue. No one is alone when we have this level of integration that you have, and we're jealous of, and that we desperately need.
And I guess you're pushing for that for those projects already, not waiting until the war ends, right?
Yeah, we're trying to.
What's the answer you're being given?
Yeah, but we are trying as much as possible. At the moment, the Palestinian Authority is working with the World Bank on a recovery and development plan, and certainly some ideas for the day after. And what we're trying to do is to navigate around all the possibilities and all those who are working on the plan, from the ministries, from the experts and pool of experts that they're working on the plan, but also with international community that is involved, including the World Bank, because the process is led with them. So we're putting all these plans on the table. We've put this plan as well on several divisions in the European Commission back in March with Borrell's office, von der Leyen's office, DG NIR, etc. And they were all positive about it, despite the several basically uncertainties that we're having in terms of when will the war stop, the current atrocities that are happening in Gaza, that we have priorities, we need to address the humanitarian conditions. We need to address also to understand what are the administrative and governance configuration will be in Gaza in the day after, who will be ruling Gaza and making sure that everything is stable and enabled. So all these issues, these are big question marks. And also for the European Commission, I think things have been really divided back in that time, and we're still going to see even a bit more difficult dialogues in the corridors of in Brussels, I think, after this current elections. But we're still adamant to speak to all those who can push these forward. Also, with the US administration back in May, we have had several discussions and really positive interactions from the White House and State Department. And we believe that people behind the scene, even with the change of the administration, will still be looking into things positively. I mean, I don't want to put so much optimism on plans that Trump would come with in the future, but I think he's a man that deals with things as a business deal. We're supposing that this is something that he would
good business.
Yeah, but again, freedom, end of occupation, peace, people's lives is not a business deal.
Yeah,
it's
You're
crucial to understand that business deals will not move forward without ensuring the dignity and the peace and the security for people who are involved. So I think this is a strong message that we also come really strongly across as an organization, because we also bring up the voices of our communities and our people. We have hundreds, maybe thousands of alumni who, from youth, from teachers, from businesses, from farmers, from community leaders and municipalities, they reach out to us. We hear their voices and we amplify them. We try to do as much as possible to help them. And it's our also responsibility to make them heard out.
In the middle of the war, our education programs remain oversubscribed. We have more Palestinians and Jordanians and Israelis who want to participate. We have extensive education programs than we can even accommodate. And that was amazing to us, to see the people want a better future, and they understand that that better future is not without coming together and trying to work things out. The Palestinian people are not going anywhere. The Israeli people are not going anywhere. The Jordanian people are not going anywhere. We can keep our heads in the sand and continue this horrific war, or take a head out of the sand and work towards a better future. It's not going to happen. There's no one to wait for other than ourselves to lead the future that we need, but we need support. So we're in Brussels with some new studies that will be coming out in February that will give more evidence as to why this is important and how this meets the interest. And we've had some discussions here in Barcelona with the Union for the Mediterranean about possibly what we can do, what we need to do together. We can't. No one can do it alone. We need to build alliances. And we need to make sure that we're not hearing just words. It really does need to be investment in supporting actions.
Yeah, of course. It's been very inspirational words from both of you. I was about to ask you before going to the questions precisely what message would you like to share or to leave in the audience, and what advice could you give to someone that has want to start and to make a difference in the world, which is the theme of this the dialogues. But more or less, you want to add something?
I would say, first of all, I think that it's important to hear different perspectives and to really open up to out-of-the-box ideas and imagination. And I think our leadership has failed us, but I think also there's a strong responsibility on international community to push forward again, and to babysit us. As Gidon mentioned, we will not be able to do it alone. And unfortunately, also international babysitting over the past 30 years has not been enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think opening up now to these ideas where also Europe has key interest in and could potentially also lead on many of these initiatives is really essential. And I think Spain could basically be one of the key players. And I actually want to thank the Spanish government for the recent recognition of the Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. It's really heartful, and it's really meaningful for us Palestinians. But again, these acts are not enough. These, maybe morally speaking, they give us a lot of boost as Palestinians. They give us, there's people behind us, there's governments behind us, but this will not end the suffering of Palestinians in villages, on checkpoints, under occupation. It's not enough. Ending the suffering of Palestinians ends with a viable peace process and a sustainable process that would bring us all to safe grounds and to a better future. Mm-hmm. And I think then the investments that need to be made in this process needs to be different from the investments made over the 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Of course. I think you want to add?
Sorry?
Any remark you want to add?
I just think that, particularly for some of the younger people that are here, my journey is that you can make a difference. So the idea of ECOPeace comes from my master's thesis at university. And I never would have imagined that the idea can be a 30-year career. Not a career, 30-year of real sweat and blood, unfortunately. And I think that's always my message when I speak to young people in particular, that you really can make a difference, that leaders don't have the answers. They're looking for solutions, and you can bring new ideas, and you can, through hard work and through making sure that you're creating lots of alliances, implement those. You can't implement anything alone. But through creating alliances, you can bring those ideas and have a real impact. Mm-hmm. And change things on the ground. Because I think this generation, when I think of the climate crisis and I read the statistics, young people feel that it's futile. And that's the worst thing. That's the worst impact possible that we could be having on our young people, that are coming and saying there's nothing they can do. Well, maybe someone wants you to feel that way. We need to make sure that, of course, all generations, but particularly young people, know they can make that difference. And if they don't make that difference, then that difference won't happen.
Thank you. Well, it's the time for you to ask if anyone in the audience want to ask a question or The speakers, that's the time. There's a person there. Two. Sí, ¿no? Así. Intentaré introducir. Sí, perquè et
Vale.
vull traduir.
Perfecte. No, bàsicament agrair-vos la possibilitat d'escoltar-vos en aquest espai. Tinc diverses preguntes. Arrel del meu anterior viatge que vaig poder tindre l'oportunitat de descobrir tota la zona del West Bank abans del 7 d'octubre, i és com avancem cap a aquest repte hidràulic, aquest desafí, aquest repte diguéssim, de que hi hagués un accés per part dels palestins i dels israelis a l'aigua, quan veiem que en les diferents zones, per exemple, a Jerusalem, tant a Jerusalem Oest i a Jerusalem Est, l'accés a l'aigua és diferent. Veiem que, per exemple, a Jerusalem Oest els israelis tenen accés durant les 24 hores a l'aigua, i a Jerusalem Est, sobretot als campaments de Jalazon o als campaments d'Aida, l'accés només és de 4 hores, i hi ha tancs, i els palestins estan obligats a tindre tancs d'aigua que a vegades no són suficients per abastir a la població. Llavors, com avancem en aquest repte? O quan veiem que en zones de la Cisjordània, no, a la zona B i C, que estan sota control administratiu i control militar per part del govern d'Israel, com facilitem aquest accés a l'aigua quan també en zones com Bardalà o zones d'Arroi, els assentaments per part dels colons sí que tenen un accés continu a l'aigua, mentre que els palestins que viuen en el que considerem com l'estat de Palestina no tenen accés a aquesta aigua. Llavors, com superem aquest repte, que és un repte complicat, i sobretot quan aquí llanceu un missatge de la importància de la creació dels estats, quan hi ha un pla per part del ministre de Seguretat de declarar la sobirania del que denominen Judea i Samària, no? En la part de Cisjordània, i sobretot com facilitem aquest accés a l'aigua i avancem cap a aquest reconeixement de l'estat de Palestí, però un reconeixement efectiu. Moltes gràcies.
Very thorough question. Have you heard it all?
Yeah, I'm very happy to respond to that. And I think we actually did talk about it. That we can move forward on the fair share of natural waters today because of advancing technologies. That the way to do that is to convince both of our governments, and it is actually both governments, both the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel, that are staying to the all or nothing approach. Either we solve Jerusalem refugees, borders and water together, or we don't move forward on any of those issues. Now, at ECOPeace, we argue that let's move forward now on water, not because moving forward on Jerusalem and settlements and borders is not urgent. It is urgent. But we can solve the water issue because of advances in technology that have actually been led by Israel. And therefore, it is reckless of both of our governments to condition, and in our perspective, to continue to hold water issues hostage. It's, the water crisis is a crisis of the region as a whole. Amman has 8 hours of water a week as well, and has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The deprivation of water resources in the West Bank is also related to the conflict, but not only. We can truly bring water prosperity through cooperation. And that's how we start to build trust. That's how we start to take on additional issues as well, to show that we can be productive partners. That's exactly what ECOPeace has been doing, advocating for the last decade at least.
Yes, and it certainly is difficult circumstances at the moment, and we see and we recognize the the hurdles and the complexities and the amount of discrepancy in terms of access to water between Israelis and Palestinians, between settlements and Palestinian communities. So we see these for our eyes, but also we're not only waiting to address those issues for long-term agreements or to basically resolve the water issue first, but we also look into bits and pieces where we can help advocate on the ground for particular communities to get additional amounts of water. In terms of if there is reduced amount of water in certain communities from the Israeli side, especially during the summer season, our teams work interactively on daily basis to ensure that we need to resolve this issue and we need to increase pumping to Palestinian communities. So in that sense, we not only address the wholesome picture, but we also address some of the specific locations that they need to have specific attention. And unfortunately, the reality is ugly, and it's indeed difficult, but we choose to make baby steps in order to improve the situation day by day. And when it comes to the two-state solution and Judea and Samaria, again, I think this is something that has to deal with the political situation. I cannot give you the answer, because here as an NGO dealing with environmental peace building is, again, we don't have a magic stick to resolve the situation. We do recognize the issues on the ground. However, we also rely that there's lots of international action against the expansion of settlements and against the settlers in general. And therefore, I think what we need to keep emphasizing is that the two-state solution is the way forward, and that any alternative vision or any alternative solution is not going to bring the peace and security that we all dream of. The eventual course of what is happening today is only a recipe for more disaster. And we recognize that, but what we see and what we're hoping for is that there are various and several people who are behind us who believe that this is not how things should be continuing.
It's good to know. There's any other question? Yeah, of course. That girl over there.
So historically, investors have run away from possible geopolitical complications. And unfortunately, the situation of Gaza now can be seen as one. So my question is, how is ECOPeace going to convince investors that adding Gaza to this project is a good idea?
So we have experience of attracting the investors for the first project, the Water Energy Exchange. Before the Abraham Accords, we traveled to the Emirates and we met with the companies that were already building solar facilities in Jordan, and showed to them that they have another market next door. They can pull a line even of their existing solar fields or expand their solar fields and sell that electricity across the border to Israel and Palestine. And they were interested because they saw the economic benefit of doing so. So, and you know, the UAE in particular at that time played a very important role after the Abraham Accords, because the relationship between Israel and Jordan wasn't healthy, remains unhealthy, and having the UAE as the middleman enabled actually that project to move forward so quickly. And $1 billion investment, discussed at least. I mean, they were supposed to sign a water and electricity purchase agreements at the last COP. to move forward $1 billion investments. When we look at the type of investor, then we see it's a lot of government wealth funds of the Emirates, of the Saudis, that serve their vision. So we're not asking them to do a favor. We're not asking them to do a favor to include Gaza. We're saying that IMEC will never succeed if Gaza is not included as an integral part, together with Israel, together with Jordan. So I think, and that's exactly why we're currently doing some more studies to show that, to show the economics of it, in addition to the political vision. And the Saudi position is in favor of the two-state solution. So it's not as if we're speaking to someone that doesn't want to see a Palestinian state.
What I can add here as well is we need to find de-risking mechanisms throughout international finance banks and organizations. And these de-risking mechanisms should have their own formulas that are really unique for our regions. We did actually speak to some of those banks and international finance institutions, including, for example, the Development Fund of the US government, the European Investment Bank. All these financial institutions are keen to move forward on these projects and de-risk them. What is really important to recognize also at the time being that there is a booming interest for some American companies and some also international companies and European ones to come and start and open offices in the West Bank. I was just talking to Gidon about this morning. It's really surprising and interesting, but they are trying now to bring out track record that they've been working in Palestine under severe circumstances to prepare for the day after in order for them to get funds and businesses running over in the future. So in that sense, I think, unfortunately, there is business makers out of war, and this has been the reality and the fact on the ground in various other regions, that they see opportunity to move in and to collaborate and to work under these circumstances and take risks.
Yeah. Yes. Wait for the micro.
Yeah. Thanks to both of you for presenting. I had two questions. The first, is there a Green Party at all in the region? And secondly, desalination. I mean, you say 80% comes from desalination. I mean, I've read that it's not the cleanest of energies. I think you need to use gas, natural gas, to produce, and then it has an effect on the seabed, etc., and it increases salinity. So is it going to remain at 80% or move higher?
Thank you. We do have a Green Party, but it's really, I don't know, it's insignificant. It doesn't play any particular role in the political scene because, unfortunately and historically, green issues at the current circumstances is not something that is being seen as a priority. The priority for basically people to be enrolled in one or another party is really driven by a different narrative and different values that are actually embedded in the current situation in terms of where they favor to be and how to respond to current circumstances. And that's where they are very weak, unlike any other European countries. I mean, even in the US, you don't find the Green parties leading anywhere. And in terms of desalination, we do recognize that this comes with a heavy environmental price. But here, what we're proposing is to utilize renewable energy from different sources to power the energy-intensive processes of desalination. And we continually see the reduced prices, both for desalination and also renewable energy production, where they can basically feed into an accelerated process of developing these industries.
So Israel has a small green party, but green issues are well integrated across all political parties, mostly because of the innovation aspect. The Israeli economy is very much built on innovation, and fighting the climate crisis is seen as an economic opportunity. And therefore, unlike Europe, and even more so, unlike the United States, where climate denial is very rampant, particularly in the United States, it's not in Israel. So although the Green Party is quite small, the climate crisis is something that is not questioned. It's well accepted. And then on the desalination aspect, Israel has now a long history of desalination. It's down to 40 cents a cubic meter. The amount of electricity that's needed to desalinate can be less than the amount of electricity to pump from a deep well. So the technology has really advanced. It should always be the last choice, though, not the first choice. We should use our natural water as efficiently as possible, but the region has run out of water. There's no question about it. And without desalination, but not only desalination, but also reusing treated wastewater, we're not going to have a future in our region.
Yes. There's another question, please.
No. Well, is there any reason why other countries like Lebanon and Syria are not participating in the ECOPeace project? Because Libya is involved in the conflict too, directly, and I think that the main water resources are located in Syria, occupied by Iran in Altos del Golan or something like that. That's a question.
We'd love to have them on board. I'm half Lebanese, by the way, so I would love to have another part of my
That's dream to
yeah, exactly. But the current circumstances are really difficult to put. I think it's, even if we find NGOs or experts, we do have connections and communications with Lebanese experts, for instance, who really believe and support our work. But unfortunately, the regimes in those two countries, it would be really, really dangerous to have NGOs opening up to say that we are collaborating with the Palestinian, Jordanian, Israeli NGO, and openly and speaking freely and operating normally. I think that would be even dangerous for their own safety and lives. But we do recognize that it is important at some point to collaborate, and that's why we still at least are opening channels to speak to Lebanese experts and Syrians wherever we find this suitable and available. Yeah, but one day we hope so.
And it's really interesting. Some of the Lebanese experts that we're speaking to say, well, how can we involve Lebanon? And I think that's wonderful, but that's not ECOPeace's role. We would love to have a civil society. We'd like to have a Lebanese director. That's how we work. We work from the region. We're able to propose things for our countries because they're the countries that we come from. We would love to see a Lebanese NGO be able, it's against the law in Lebanon, to even meet with an Israeli. It's against the law. You'll be prosecuted. So it's not possible. But should it be possible, we will be the first to welcome. And then they would be equal partners in our endeavor, and they will have their say, and it'll make our conversations even more difficult because we have to agree. We move forward by consensus. We'd have a fourth leg to negotiate on a daily basis to reach the type of agreements that move us forward. But we would welcome that.
Actually, we were a bit optimistic at some point when the Israel-Lebanon Maritime Agreement took place, because at that point when they started somehow agreeing on natural gas, we thought, well, and we utilized this in our narrative that if that has been possible, then water issues can be possible. But unfortunately, things have turned out a different way. We're 10 steps back from where we were before. But again, we survived really difficult times as an organization, and we're still hopeful that even with those, this time it's exceptional. We don't say that this time is like any other time of wars in Gaza in 2008, 2014. It's totally on a different scale, and the pain is different, the amount of destruction is different, the amount of frustration is a different level. But we can't stop from dreaming. I mean, if we're people like us, crazy people like us, stop dreaming, I think the world will be in a different, totally dark place. Mm-hmm. I think we still need to go and get going to still dream and try something, of course.
Is any other question? Yes, there's another. Two. Okay.
Hi. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming here today. It's a real pleasure to have you both here, and the example you have set is something that is inspirational, I think, to us all, especially in these times. I speak as someone who has both Jewish family and Arab family. So shukran jazilan, toda rabba. Thank you so much for being here. And it's not a question. I just wanted to really convey that appreciation to you both. So they say waging war is easy, making peace is hard. You guys are doing the hard work. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your work. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you so much. Yeah. One last question there. It's the last one, I guess.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for your wonderful work. And I wanted to ask a question that has been burning through my mind the whole time. That is, in a political scenario that it's as divided and as full of hate speech and such things as it is the political scenario nowadays, how do you address this kind of collaboration projects without getting instantly rejected?
Yeah, we're definitely, as first of all, as an organization, but also as individuals, we are heavily condemned for working together and being together. We're tagged as normalizers, as traitors, as workers with the enemy. I've personally been attacked several times on social media with a bunch of lies that I would never imagine. I mean, they are really silly lies that go around on social media, to the point that at some level, I've even found comments on social media calling for my assassination. And they were all worried. Gidon was worried. Let's ship you somewhere else. Let's take you out of the country. I was like, why? Why would I do so? I'm not doing anything wrong. I think the best way to do this, especially in the era of social media, that everyone thinks that they know everything and they claim that they are right on the far end of extremism, is making things more difficult for us to navigate around. And how we deal about it is we keep operating to prove without responding. So it's our work that speaks of our success. It's our work and the results of our work on the ground and how we improve things on the ground for our people and for our communities is what speaks of, is actually what responds to these accusations. And I think we still have some reasonable people on board from all sides, on the government level, on stakeholders level, on people who have been involved in the Oslo Accords, on former ministers, that also keep the doors open for us, at least to hear us and to absorb our ideas. And even if they say, well, it's not the right moment, they think that at some point, this is the future. So they don't block us and tell us, well, this is not something that we want to talk about, but maybe this is something that we can talk about later. This is what keeps the momentum for us to keep going, is really by not, again, stepping back and saying, well, we are condemned, we are worried, but rather to do whatever we can with those who support us.
It's difficult in such a polarized environment, right?
It's extremely difficult, and I think that's why we need to listen. We need to understand the lessons of why the Oslo process failed, and one of the reasons that it failed is that the leadership that was willing to move forward didn't take into account enough the power of the spoilers and their ability to completely disrail the process. And any new process must react and respond and reduce their power. And reducing their power requires us to agree on the end goal up front. Oslo didn't agree publicly on the end goal. It talked about a two-state solution, but the word two-state solution never appears in the document itself. It left a lot of gray, and that grayness was seen as something that could, maybe help
Prolong.
Prolong or break ground, but it backfired. When we have the Paris climate commitment, we have a commitment that we understand we must stop 1.5 degree increase in temperature. That's on the first page of the Paris. We know where we're headed. We need to make sure that any revival of the peace process knows where we're headed. And there are two critical issues that we must agree on. And that is that there will be an independent Palestinian state next to the state of Israel, and that Israel's security will be guaranteed also by Palestine and the other Arab states. If that's not clearly in the end game, if that's left vague, then we enable the spoilers to do again what we enabled them last time, or what the leadership perhaps didn't fully understand last time. And we mustn't allow that to happen again.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and especially to both of you. It's been very inspiring hearing from you. And if I want to just take some of the words, I would take that Nada said, that craziness that made you all bring together and cooperate between different communities, and that craziness that made you see each other in the eye. That's what is needed much more in the world. Thank you so much.